Why do some bronies believe that Fluttershy is a pushover? Or think that she keeps relearning the same lessons over and over? Or that her character conflicts will always center around her shy nature?
This was me. 5 years ago today, I uploaded my very first video, Fluttershy's weakness is part of her greatest strength. To be honest, it has been a little difficult for me to go back and watch this because there are certain aspects that make me cringe.
Often believing herself to be less worthwhile than other ponies, wanting to avoid conflict so much that she'll even allow others to take advantage of her.
The audio is particularly inconsistent as I didn't have an external microphone and was instead using the internal mic that came with my laptop. So throughout the recordings, the volume levels are constantly going back and forth depending on how close I was to the side of the computer at the time. And while I'm trying to keep a calm and consistent demeanor, the pitch and tone in my voice work is more than a little random at times. Plus, with all the years I put into making videos nowadays, those few moments of background noise in the middle of recording are really distracting for me. But on the plus side, I am glad to see that even way back in my early days, I put a lot of effort on changing up the visuals frequently while making sure that every image on screen was relevant to the point I was making.
But Fluttershy's weaknesses and what she goes through to overcome them speaks a great deal about her character. Her fears seem to be a constant burden to her, and this is something that she's had to deal with since childhood.
I had no idea what I was doing when I first decided that I was going to make a video. I just knew that I had something I really wanted to talk about that I felt no one else was addressing at the time. So, over the course of 3 days, I slowly figured out how to use iMovie while writing up a script and hoped that perhaps a few dozen people would get to see it. And over the course of many months, the ideas I brought up would slowly spread out into the fandom. Instead, it was picked up by Equestria Daily within only a few hours, and by the following morning it had been viewed by more than 3,000 people, about 200 of which thought my channel was worth subscribing to. So, after feeling more than a little dumbfounded by so much attention all at once, I figured, well, I suppose I have some ideas about Applejack, and I've been uploading about 3 to 5 videos every week since.
But I still feel puzzled when I hear someone talk about how Fluttershy's character doesn't seem to go anywhere.
To this day, it is both a little humbling and more than a little confusing looking back at how far I've come. But even more so, going back to my very first video on YouTube has given me some needed perspective. While going back to your earlier works can be a little cringe-inducing, like I mentioned earlier, as it is hard not to notice all the little amateur mistakes you made way back when, it can also remind you of just why you got into creating to begin with. How you found that passion, that initial spark which drove you, inspired you to try something you never had before. Hearing myself talk about Fluttershy when all there was to go on at that point was the first 3 seasons of MLP, it helped me remember why I had gotten into the show in the first place. Why the brony community itself had intrigued me in ways that no other fandom before had. And discussing how even though many weaknesses can be overcome through persistence and patience, there may in fact be some weaknesses which can actually be of greater benefit if you learn to accept them, if you allow them to humble you, and, in turn, like in Fluttershy's case, perhaps become part of your greatest strengths.
She may falter along the way. She may lose herself in a panic. but she will always shine through in the moments that matter the most.
I think it would be good for me to leave a link to this first video of mine, despite its glaring flaws that I just can't seem to ignore. It does show how little I knew about video making back then, but I'm learning that I need to put aside such feelings. It really can be helpful to go back to your roots from time to time and rediscovering just a little bit of that spark that got you started in the first place. Before any massive group projects, before attending half a dozen conventions every year, before anyone had ever heard of me on the internet, I just wanted to talk about why Fluttershy inspired me. I am Dr. Wolf, and I am immensely thankful that each of you still want to hear from me.